The man came home from work and, in anticipation of a delicious dinner, went to the kitchen. But there was an unpleasant surprise. "I don't understand. What is this?" Nick stared unhappily at a plate of pasta without anything. "Dinner," his spouse, Catherine, answered calmly. "Do you call that dinner? I'm a man. I need some meat." "We have no money to buy meat," Catherine explained quietly. But instead of calming her husband down, her tone made him very mad. "What did you spend all the money on? Did you spend it on all the manicures and new clothes again? I gave you my paycheck not long ago." Catherine looked at her nails, which hadn't seen nail polish for a long time, and said quietly, sighing, "First of all, you gave me a paycheck 3 weeks ago, and I spent it all to buy groceries. I used my salary to pay the utilities, bills, and a loan. I didn't buy any clothes." "Oh, really? You didn't?" "Catherine, I'm not an idiot." Catherine started to eat silently. She was sick and tired of her husband's constant quarrels and discontent. This constant lack of money and her husband's unwillingness to find a better-paying job was exhausting her. "To make more money, I have to work harder," he yelled. "I'm not a dray horse to work from dawn till dusk. You should spend less money at your beauty salons." "Well, I work 2 jobs somehow, but I'm not a dray horse either," Catherine answered in a soft voice. "Don't try to compare my work to yours. You just spend all day drinking coffee and chatting with your colleagues, and that's it. You could get a 3rd job while working like that." "Well, at least you could find one if you think it's so easy." Catherine had some savings. She was going to buy a new coat, and not because she wanted something new, but because it was embarrassing to wear the old one to work. Catherine did her best to hide shabby fabric. She restitched buttons and sewed on some appliques, but still it was obvious that it was time to throw it away. Regardless, the next day Catherine went to the grocery store and bought a chicken. The money was taken from her savings. "That's all right. They promised a bonus this month. Maybe then the money saved will be enough to buy a coat," the woman consoled herself. Her husband was not impressed with a dinner of vegetables and chicken. He looked squeamishly at what his wife had cooked and left the table in silence, making it clear that he was not going to eat this miserable semblance of food. But the truth was that Nick came to his mother's after work and had dinner at her place, justifying himself by the fact that his wife had wasted all the money on manicures and there was nothing to eat at home. His mother shook her head reproachfully, feeling sorry that her son had such a spendthrift wife, and put one more juicy piece of meat and some salad on his plate. But she never cooked such expensive food for herself, preferring potato soup and porridge. His mother also tried to save money as much as she could. The prices of medicines had increased so much that she had to choose between eating or getting medical treatment. On payday, Nick gave his wife only half of the money. "I need a new winter jacket," he explained. "I've had this one for 2 years. Enough." "Well, I've been wearing the same coat for 5 years. Is that okay?" Catherine asked indignantly. "You have a choice, either beauty salons or a new coat," said her husband. "Oh, really? And who's going to pay the loan, the utilities, and all the other bills? Who do you think pays for that? Paying the utilities is a mere penny." "Seriously? Why don't you take a look at the receipts?" "That's the last thing I need. I'm not a woman to worry about receipts." Catherine burst into tears. She knew she was never going to get a new coat, but her husband didn't even pay attention to her tears and quietly walked off to the room. "Stop being so hysterical. Just go and heat up my dinner," he shouted from there. The next day, Catherine was absent-minded at work. After lunch, her boss, Mr. Donegan, called her to his office. "Catherine, I don't understand. What's wrong? You seem distracted today. Is there any problem?" "No," the woman muttered quietly, but tears flowed treacherously from her eyes. "Okay, let's calm down." Mr. Donegan gave her a glass of water, waited for her to take a few sips, and commanded, "Tell me." And the woman told her everything that was going on in her family. She could no longer keep quiet about it, nor could she try to show others that everything was fine. "Do you and your husband have children?" the boss asked after listening to her story. "No, I'm afraid to take that step." "That's good. Children from such a husband is not a good idea." Mr. Donegan stroked Catherine's hand, who was staring at him frightened. "I mean, I could help you, and if you had kids, it would be much more difficult. You know that our factory has a dormitory. It's not luxurious, but the living conditions are quite comfortable. One of our workers got married and moved in with her husband. Her room is vacant now. I'll provide you with a letter of referral, but please don't take too long to make your decision. There are others who need accommodation." "Thank you, Mr. Donegan, but you shouldn't—" Catherine wiped away her tears. "Don't say no right away. Think it over. You have a week." The boss looked at the woman carefully and added, "Now go back to work, and don't worry so much." Nick didn't talk to his wife. He didn't even eat dinner, but went to his mother's house after work. Catherine tried to make peace with him and even spent the rest of her savings to buy fresh steaks, but Nick defiantly walked past the kitchen. But at night, while his wife slept, he snuck into the kitchen and ate all the steaks. Catherine noticed that, but she didn't say anything, hoping her husband would be willing to reconcile after that. Just before the lunch break, Mr. Donegan ran into the office where Catherine and the other women were working. "Girls, I need your help. We need to take samples of our products to potential customers right now." The women looked at each other. No one wanted to go anywhere. Everyone made up some non-existent urgent work and pretended to be busy. Catherine decided to help out her boss. "Mr. Donegan, I can do that." She got up from her desk. The customers liked the samples. They looked at them with enthusiasm and promised to place a big order. But what embarrassed Catherine the most was one of the customers, who complimented not only the products but mostly Catherine herself. He even walked her to the exit of the building. "Catherine, can we see each other again?" he asked and quickly added, "On business matters." "Come visit our factory," Catherine smiled. Her mood lifted, and she walked leisurely toward the bus stop. Suddenly she saw her husband, Nick. He was entering some building with another man. Catherine cautiously walked over and looked at the sign. It was a restaurant. Through the huge window, she could see her husband enjoying the food the waiter brought. The woman decided to find out where her husband got the money to eat at the restaurant. She entered the restaurant and made her way to the table where her husband was sitting. To avoid a needless fight, the woman decided to overhear what they were talking about. Maybe this man was paying for lunch as a thank you for something. The tables were separated by partitions, and Catherine hid behind one of them. "The ribs are fantastic today," pronounced the stranger. "Yes, but the salad isn't that good. Not enough dressing and salt," Nick replied. "I think the salad is brilliant. You've just become too spoiled," laughed the man. "I guess you've forgotten what your wife cooks you for dinner." "I don't eat dinner at home anymore," Nick stated boastfully. "Really? Are you going to the restaurant for dinner too?" "No, I go to my mother's in the evening. She knows how to feed a man. I can't afford to go to a restaurant twice a day." "Doesn't Catherine wonder why you bring her so little money?" "She thinks my salary is the same as it was 2 years ago. There's no need for her to know how much I earn. Soon I'll not even give her any money at all. After all, she lives in my apartment. I don't have to give her my money." "What if she leaves you?" "Who needs her? She's stopped taking care of herself lately. Now she doesn't look pretty and attractive." Listening to this, Catherine wanted to run up and kick her husband. She was denying herself everything because of this man, and he dared to talk about her that way. Catherine wiped away the tears, came out of her hiding place, and slowly approached her husband's table. He had already noticed her and was looking at her with shock. She was the last person he expected to meet in an expensive restaurant. "You are wrong, Nick. I'm going to leave you, and I'm going to file for divorce," Catherine said firmly, looking at her shocked husband. "Oh, please stop it, Catherine. Don't embarrass yourself and get out of here." Nick quickly came to his senses. "See?" Nick turned to his companion. "That's what I told you. Not only does she look bad and can't cook, but she's also hysterical. I'm sick of her tantrums," Nick finished, looking at Catherine. "Do you have any idea why I look so bad?" Catherine looked around at the restaurant customers who were watching the unfolding scene with interest. "Because he spends all his salary only on himself. And I, working 2 jobs, spend my entire salary to pay the utilities, the loan, all the bills, and to buy food for both of us. But that's not all. He also eats at the expense of his retired mother, and does not think that she has a small pension, and if she feeds her son, she will die of hunger. I'm leaving you." Catherine turned around and headed for the exit, accompanied by the silence that hung over the restaurant. "Hysterical!" Nick shouted after her, but she didn't even turn around. "Nick, really," said his colleague, "your wife doesn't look like someone who spends all her money on herself. And it's not good to eat off your elderly mother either. You don't pay for her dinners, and you don't buy her groceries, do you? You spend all your money on restaurants and new clothes. You're cheating on your wife, too." "Do you believe her?" Nick started making excuses. "I'm not stupid, Nick. I can see that everything she said is true. I'm sorry, but it disgusts me to sit at the same table with you. I should go, too." The man threw some banknotes on the table and walked out of the restaurant. "You're going to regret this," Nick thought furiously. He impatiently waited until the end of the day and rushed home. Catherine!" He shouted from the threshold into the apartment, but no one came out. Nick, without taking his shoes off, walked into the living room, then into the bedroom. Catherine was nowhere to be found. With a hunch that something was wrong, he opened the wardrobe. His wife's belongings were also gone. He rushed into the kitchen. No one was there. Only the keys to the apartment were on the kitchen table. "All right, let's see how long you can survive without me. You'll come crawling back," the disgruntled husband thought. Catherine looked in the mirror, enjoying her new clothes. Since she had left her husband, she suddenly had some spare money that she had been saving. So today, putting a part of her salary into the box again, she realized that there was a good stack of banknotes. Catherine counted the money and sat down on the bed, surprised. A new coat became a reality, and the new boots were a nice bonus. "So? Surprised? You look like you don't know where you got that money," laughed her roommate Jillian. "Oh, this is so unusual. I can't get used to the fact that now I have enough money for everything I need," Catherine whispered. "There's nothing unusual about that. We don't pay money for the dormitory. We don't pay any loan now. You need to buy food for yourself only, and you don't eat much. That's why you can save up enough money. Even one salary would be enough for you to support yourself. But you also work 2 jobs, so there's nothing to be surprised about." Catherine went to the mall with Jillian and finally bought a new coat and boots. Then they went to the cafe to celebrate their purchases. "Is Stephen coming today?" Jillian asked slyly, eating ice cream. Stephen was the same customer who had showered Catherine with compliments when she brought them the samples. He began courting Catherine as soon as she moved into the dormitory. At first, she ignored him, but soon, under Jillian's pressure, her heart melted. "Let him prove that not all men are the same as your Nick," her friend persuaded Catherine. And so tonight they were to have their 3rd date. Usually they walked somewhere in the park, since Catherine was still embarrassed to wear new clothes. But today she was ready to accept his invitation to go to a restaurant. Nick sullenly forked at the unappetizing pasta. He didn't have a penny in his pockets. For the first month after Catherine's leaving, he continued to live as before and was even glad that now he did not have to give his wife part of his salary. But a month later, he got a phone call. "You have a loan payment delay. We have assessed penalties and expect you to pay soon," the bank called. Nick was outraged. How so? Why is Catherine not paying off the loan? He called his wife to scold her, but Catherine's answers shocked him. "The loan is made out to you, and the item you bought with that money stayed with you. So why should I pay for it?" Catherine answered calmly and hung up. After a while, there was not only a loan debt but also a utility payment delay. Nick never wondered who was paying the bills, and it turned out that the bills were huge, considering that he constantly forgot to turn off the lights and water in the apartment. He had no choice. When he got his paycheck, Nick paid off his debts and was left with almost no money. He went to see his mother, but she wasn't at home. She was hospitalized. Since she spent almost all her money on groceries to feed her son, she could not afford to buy the necessary medicines, and she began to have serious health problems. Dinners at his mother's house couldn't save Nick anymore. Buying the cheapest pasta with the last of his money, Nick tried to make it to his next paycheck, cursing Catherine. After a week of this diet, Nick couldn't eat pasta anymore. He even loathed the smell of it. To stifle his hunger, he went for a walk. It was a weekend and people were walking the streets at night, going into cafes and restaurants. In the window of one of the restaurants, Nick saw his ex-wife. She looked gorgeous in a beautiful dress with a new hairstyle. She was laughing at what the well-dressed man sitting across from her was telling her. Nick turned around and ran back home to his cold pasta.
"All right, everyone's presentations are done," Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? "I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.